All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. At least looks like a decent morning thus far as we end November of 2021. Kind of crazy. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you for attending today's presentation, Retiring the Old Age Story. My name is Margie Cosmerl. I'm president of Blue Heron Financial Group. We are associated with Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union, and we thank the credit union for allowing us to present today. So this presentation is different than many others that we do throughout the year, but I hope you will find it thought-provoking. We have been working with pre-retirees, retirees for over 2 decades here at Blue Heron Financial Group. And this is going to be, well, it's going to be story time, not hopefully too hokey, but again, thought-provoking, I hope. So let's jump in here and see what this is all about. So you'll notice that this presentation was created by Hartford Funds, who was one of the leading originating companies backing MIT with the age-based lab. That actually started in 1999. I don't know about you, but it seems like 99 was just yesterday when it was 22 years ago. And what the purpose of the AgeLab is to understand the opportunities and the challenges if we are so blessed to live a good long life, and what that consumer behavior is all about, and what goes into decision making, and what those trends in demographics look like. All of that then plays into whether it's retirement planning or the investment solutions that we use here at Blue Heron to answer to this challenge of longevity. It's great if we can live a good long life, but how are we going to meet those demands? So we really appreciate that MIT has stepped up and has made this such an important part of their curriculum, and you know, everything that we get back from AgeLab has just been really, really insightful for what we do. So I love this. This is called the longevity issue. And what I really love is this statement on the cover of the MIT Technology Review stating, old age is over if you want it. And hey, as I progress through my age, I continue to hear myself say, hey, it's just a number. If we think about where we are in whatever station of life that you're in, hey, wouldn't it be great to get this announcement? Old age is over. Okay, well, let's take some steps back in time, and as we go through the slides today, my goal is to pull this all together. Why are we looking back at history? Well, history does provide relevant clues. And whether that's us looking back in history for clues of how markets reacted during different times, or our focus today on what is aging of America looking like? What does retirement look like today versus historically? So this is a great picture here. On the left, what you're looking at is dating back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and you'll see in this busy city environment, almost every head is wearing a hat. That's just how it was. But then there was a societal shift come 1960s. On the right-hand side, you'll see nobody's wearing a hat. So that's how quickly trends can change. And where and how this all ties in, again, is how we're looking at aging. here's what we want to cover today. Well, where did this old age phenomenon originate from? What's old age today? And then my challenge to you is, how are you going to create your own story of what this may be in your future? Love this slide. This could easily have been my parents on their favorite trip, because I will ask my dad. My mom passed away 2 years ago, but I will ask this question: what was your and mom's favorite trip? And they would always say they were so fortunate to be able to travel a fair amount, and they went to the South Pacific. They love snorkeling. So when I see this slide, it makes me think of my parents and how much they enjoyed their retirement, which is a far cry from what old age looked like way back in the day. So you'll see this cartoon, if you will, is called The Vital Force. So back in the day, imagine that the thought process was that you had this vitality that you were born with, but over time it just kind of seeped away, and that was that. And as your vitality was stripped from you or seeped away, as I said, then old age took over, and you will eventually just meet your just desserts, I guess is how it goes. So, that was it. You live, this, the life force just drains. And then as we moved on, well, folks weren't just simply dying, but then became this challenge of how to help them. And if they're not as vital as they once were, then what? And where do the sources of help come from? And I'll just keep referring to back in the day. This is actually looking back in the 1700s colonial era. Again, just putting on your historic thinking cap and really contemplating, well, what did happen to people as they aged historically back in the 1700s, 1600s, even 1800s, and what kind of care was required and where did it come from? So this outdoor relief, the picture of the woodpile here, is referring to how older people received assistance, but that's typically coming from other family or perhaps from church, and came in whether it's a monetary assistance or firewood, as this depicts, or food. But then as time went on, there was this concept of the almshouse. So it started, I believe, in Europe, but as folks came over to the United States, and again, you've got the aging there, the almshouses became more common. And they sure didn't seem like a real dandy place to end. You can see that they're all sitting here having who knows what kind of grub. I'm just making an observation. I see more women in this, as is still the case, women outliving men. But it just doesn't look super comfortable there. And in the almshouse, you would have aging people combined with criminals even, and even maybe, the town drunk is thrown in there. And so they're cohabitating, just kind of thrown into this almshouse community, not really looking too favorable. And then as time moves on, and I'll just read this quote here by Dr. Coughlin, who was the director of the MIT AgeLab, that in the early 20th century, the belief that older workers crowded out the younger workers, and the more efficient younger workers became more widespread. So again, we're back to this. Okay, so what do you do with the older workers? And then, as we know, we went through that period of the Great Depression, and so you've got this twofold problem. You had the recession, the Great Depression, sorry, not recession, the Great Depression happening. Not only was it old people coming out of jobs, but young people too. And the solution that came up in 1935 and was signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president, was for Social Security. So a pension as such to then take care of the monetary needs of those aging. Now, let's keep in mind that in that time frame, life expectancy was only mid-60s, whereas today it's mid-80s. And here at Blue Heron, we do a full presentation on Social Security and how Social Security strategies figure into overall retirement. But bringing us back to the task at hand, we're looking at historic old age, and now we're going to take a look at this evolution that came about. Let's think back to the slide that had hats on, and then that transition overnight almost to a trend of hats off. Well, the same thing was happening with old age. It was, hey, put that horse out to pasture, whether it was the almshouse or, you know, dropping firewood off at the house or laying old workers off. But then came this new phenomenon of what retirement could look like and making it sound actually good. And that's when Del Webb, many of you have heard of Del Webb communities. So the very first Del Webb retirement community started back in 1959. And as the story goes, it was in Arizona, and this concept was starting to take shape. No one really thought that it would gain traction. There was a lot of doubt that such an entity would ever be appealing. But lo and behold, what did happen was thousands of cars actually lined up to get into this first retirement community. Again, this is going back to 59-60, and in preparation for today's webinar, I was just perusing through and looking at, yes, Sun City is still a retirement community, but there are also Sun Cities in different states. And then here in Maryland, one of the competitors to Sun City is Leisure World. Some of you may have heard that, just outside of Washington, D.C. And we're talking, you know, thousands of homes, or how about the Villages down in Florida? So you're getting a sense of, wow, this transformation and reworking this whole concept of old age and how it's come about. I mean, we're talking golf courses and just super active communities. I'm sure everyone on today's presentation, if you were interested in joining this, have experienced or know people who have moved to such a community. We've seen it with the clients that we work with, and some are all about moving into these over 55 communities and all the amenities. But then there are also those who prefer to stay in their home and or communities that have young people and old people and the like. So moving along, let's continue talking about old age today. And I think that as I conceptualize old age, number one, isn't it always intriguing how you can think back when you were in your maybe teens and you heard about somebody was 40 or 50, how that sounded like old age. And as we progress through, whether it be 50s and 60s, well, even 80s, not so old anymore, maybe 90s or 100. And so anyway, just an observation. So again, I'll just read this quote out, that instead of being dreaded years of decline, retirement would become something people longed for. Boy, is that true. We hear it time and time again when we here at Blue Heron are talking about goals and starting with, okay, what is your goal? And this dream evolves. Once again, that's the challenge I want to put before you today, is what is that goal? What is that dream? So back to the quote here, that through the magic of marketing, retirement is no longer meant only the end of work. It was sold as the beginning of a new and even better life. So that is taken from the Washington Post 16 years ago in 2005, the selling of retirement and how we bought it. And boy, have we. What you're looking at right here is a graph where there was just this poll taken of about 1,000 individuals to share their thoughts with one word on what they thought about life after career. What is that? What is the word that comes to mind? Well, what you're going to see here, the big circles on the screen are those that was the greatest response. And this was taken, this poll, across all ages. And the median age, as you see on the bottom here, is, or was, age 42. So for the most part, green is positive, and that's what you will see the majority of those circles. So again, using words to describe retirement, and there are a few negatives in there: old, death, boring, tired, lonely, out of all the many words that are used. But what's interesting is that a third of those responses were concentrated in these 10 words: relax, happy, travel, that's a big one, retirement, family, another big one, fun, success, freedom, maybe from the alarm clock, money, fulfilled. So interesting, right? So again, thinking back, and maybe even try this response with some friends. I did that. I was with a group of women friends, and I said, okay, if I said come up with some words to describe life after work or after career, throw some words at me. And sure enough, my friends came up with words that fell right into this category. So now we're redefining old age. Here's another interesting observation of, now on the left-hand side of your screen, full-time workers. What is the majority of their time? Where is their time spent? Well, as you can imagine, working is number one. So these are the top weekday activities, average minutes per day of full-time workers, and then retirees. So, okay, great. You'll see on the right-hand side, catching up on sleep. But here's something interesting. There's a lot of TV watching going on. And why I think that this is brought to our attention is all those words and everything that we looked at before and what we might be thinking about in terms of retirement, gosh, not all of that ends up being travel, playing golf, spending time with the grandkids. And maybe there's a lot of downtime. And maybe thinking in advance of retirement is really critical. When we sit down and go through our analysis from a financial perspective, we're asking this question in the midst of, okay? We're looking at things financially to see how things are lining up based on the goals of a soon-to-be retiree. But we're also asking this question, what are you going to do when every day is a Saturday? What does that look like? So just a couple other observations here. Again, there's not a lot of TV watching with full-time workers. Eating, drinking, there's more time for that. Think about social circles. You have more time to spend really enjoying a meal. That part sounds pretty good. Food prep, not as much time on in our day-to-day work lives, but more over on the retiree side of things. So again, just interesting observations of what's truly taking place in the day of the life of. Okay, so this I think is huge, that back in the 1880s, 75% of men over 64 worked. 75% of men. Now, again, life expectancy wasn't that long. I said it earlier, it was only in the mid-60s, maybe pushing out to 70, but 75% of the men were still working in some capacity. Whereas in 2019, only 20% of men over 64 were working. So what are they doing? Well, here is the chart of the perception of what older people need as time goes on. And you may remember this hierarchy chart or even food pyramids. So it's taking that concept and blending in this perception of what older people need as time goes on. So sure, those basic needs you'll see at the bottom of the chart, the physiological needs, food, warmth, water, rest, yeah, basic needs, sign me up. And then the safety needs, yeah, there is absolutely. When I think about my dad living alone, I'm all about him having his alarm going on over there. Very important, okay? Now we're getting into the psychological needs. That having relationships, close relationships, belonging to a community, that is right there smack dab in the middle almost, okay? That psychological need, absolutely, not just a perception, it exists. And then those needs of feeling accomplishment. And that continues to be the case whether working or later on in life. And then the top of this pyramid, the self-fulfillment needs, self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. I visited my sister-in-law recently who moved to a retirement community, and I asked her, she is early 70s, like, what does she do all day? Well, she rattled off every single day what it is that she's doing, which includes her re-exploring her creative side. And that is, in her case, she's doing painting. She's also learning how to play bridge. She's part of different groups, whether it's line dancing, again, back to the creativity. and understanding where she gets her fulfillment. So that's a big part of this aging process. So now I want you to think about your own selves. We looked back at history. Boy, getting old back in gosh, 1800s, early 1900s, moving forward, sure didn't look like any picnic. Then we saw how society just went through this major shift somewhere in the 1960s. And we don't have to look too far to find those communities that were really answering to those different needs that we just took a look at. So now think about your own self in this aging process. Again, here we are, Blue Heron Financial Group, talking about old age, and not just from the financial perspective. So if we're considering, okay, now we are aging out of our career, and we've heard it numerous times. I remember the first time, again, talking to someone across the conference room table about what is your plan for retirement? What's your goal? And I heard TBD. Now, many of you have heard this. I thought to be determined, right? No, now I've come to understand it's either 3 or 2, because I've heard both. 3 bad days or 2 bad days. And thus the planning that we do to show the individual or couple, yes, you are on target. This looks like this can work for this retirement. Or conversely, it is our responsibility to say, this is not really lining up right now. We've got to rethink what this might look like. Meanwhile, we've got this vision that's changing, and I think this is really interesting here. So of the percentage of 44 to 70-year-olds saying that each of the following best describes their vision of retirement, the vast majority are calling it a new chapter in life. A new chapter in life. I love that. In fact, I think when we are congratulating our clients who are moving into retirement, we're many times sending them cards and congratulating them and excited for them as they ponder this new chapter in life. Certainly a time for rest and relaxation. Sounds good? Sign me up. Umbrella in the sand, the lounge chair, a good book or podcast, Audible, sounds good. As we're looking at gray and skies here in Maryland, a typical November day. The beginning of the end, I'm glad only 7% referred to it that way. My parents had a place in Florida for a while. My dad always loved saying, well, you know what they call Florida? They call it heaven's waiting room. I'd be like, okay, that sounds a little morbid to me. I prefer this view of the beach, right? And then 9% say a continuation of what life was. Maybe retirement's not really changing a whole lot in what they're doing. Maybe it's less work, but there's still work. That's what we're hearing as we notice trends of retirees. It's that desire to scale back, not completely to be here in the work environment one day and completely out the next day. And there's varying reasons for that. Some of it is financial. Some of it may be to continue medical insurance until Medicare age, but also maybe it is to continue to have that validation. So here's another interesting stat. When we look at this aging of America, how many plan to keep working? In 2020, 71% of workers say that they do plan to work past a traditional retirement age, either part-time or full-time. I just mentioned that on the prior slide. This is an observation we here at Blue Heron have taken note of. And it makes sense, especially when people are looking at the cost of medical going forward. Retiring too early without having some supplemental offset to health insurance, or eventually Medicare. I mean, these are really, I'll call them big ticket items. So this desire to continue to work, there may be some very relative important financial reasons, but there's also back to that validation and staying attuned and keeping sharp and being plugged into with colleagues and all the experience that one has gained over years and being able to impart that out. So I'm not so surprised. The number's higher than I would have expected. 71% saying that they plan to work past traditional retirement age. And back in 95, only 14% said that they'd work after 65. So again, I think that's really fascinating. Here are some myths. I can't help but smile at some of these. So let's just go through here. So myths of aging, that you're going to retire at 65. Well, for some, full retirement age for Social Security is not until 67. And as time goes by, that 67 is more the norm. And it's an important time frame to keep in mind. And that's something that we delve deep on, as I mentioned before, with Social Security planning and retirement planning and tax law changes, because it's all relative. Another myth, retirement is all about fun and leisure. Now, there are a lot who have retired. They're playing pickleball. They're doing a lot, and I love that pickleball is a thing, okay? Maybe not crossing the full tennis court, but hey, let's have some fun playing a racket sport and competing and back to being part of that community. Great. Another myth, you won't work anymore because Social Security and Medicare will see you through. I hope, and I do doubt that anyone attending today's presentation think that Social Security and Medicare will be enough. We have seen with our seniors who are relying strictly on Social Security and Medicare, it is clearly not enough. Enough said on that. You'll always be traveling. Well, there's a cost to traveling. And we have absolutely been excited for our clients who have done the RV across America. My goodness, you all have, whether it was COVID or not, you may have observed on the roads, there are so many RVs. There are so many fifth wheels. That was something new we've learned about here at Blue Heron over the years. What was a fifth wheel? You know, the camper that goes behind the truck. Well, there's a cost to all of that. So that does play into the overall planning. Your kids will take care of you while you spend lots of time with grandkids. There are absolutely those grandparents who are helping with child care. However, it's on their terms. There's not too many that we work with who have taken over that job full time. They are there to help out with the grandkids, and you know, with proximities not always being right there within what, a half-hour radius, you know, that may or may not be the case. Our kids may be scattered across the United States. So visiting and traveling, that might be intertwined, but it may not be so much of your kids taking care of you while you spend all that time with the grandkids. In fact, I'll just take this one step further, and it's a presentation for another day, and that's on the whole long-term care side of things. Thinking about what your plan is if you require care later on in life. If you plan on the kids taking care of you, I think you better have that hard conversation. Enough said. Florida is the best place to retire. Well, I'm not sure that Florida is the only best place to retire. We happen to be in a high tax state here in Maryland. There are other high tax states. A desire to move to a more retiree-friendly tax state is absolutely on the radar of many. And why not? If you can get zero tax taken out of your pension, and it goes that much further, especially in the times that we're living in where inflation is coming back, well, why not consider possible relocation? And yet, back to the families, if there's grandkids, there's a magnet going on there in many cases. Another myth, you'll ultimately end up in a nursing home. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. As I mentioned before, we do a whole presentation, or if you're interested in doing a deeper dive on how not to financially end up in the nursing home and have care at home and how to financially address that potential, by all means, send us an email and we'll get back to you on that. The cost, if you do end up in a nursing home, it is staggering. In today's world, it is not unusual for full-on care to be running $12,000 a month. So it's not anybody's favorite topic to be thinking or talking about. However, statistically, a couple who's 65, boy, they're not in our favor. Someone of that couple is likely to require care, and that care comes at a heavy financial burden. And the last one here, employers won't hire you because you're too old. Myth, legend, don't know. But what I do know, back to what we're observing, is that corporate America, Northrop Grumman is a prime example, they do not want to see all that age and experience going out the door. If they can continue to keep those who have that experience under their belts, maybe asking for the company to grant less hours of work, well, it sure, again, our observation is that indeed is happening. So again, just busting through some of these myths as they are just that. So let's think about your story. Who are the characters of your story? Who do you envision spending that next chapter with? Where is the setting? This is the challenge before you. Is it Florida? Is it South Carolina? Is it Pennsylvania? Is it Arizona? But thinking about that setting, maybe it's in your very own home. And then the plot. What is that storyline? I love this picture of this woman at the bakery, and she looks like she's assessing sales, perhaps, what's left, what she's going to need to create. What does that creative plot look like for you? What is that thing that you envision yourself doing once you're stepping away from your current career path? Conflict. We're always going to face some type of conflict. Is it a medical problem, issue, procedure? How will you overcome that conflict? It's important, once again, observation by Blue Heron, that we see later as retirement progresses that there is that desire to be closer to medical. I'm thinking of a couple. They purchased a retirement home in North Carolina, and that has been wonderful. However, as time progresses, the need to be closer than an hour and a half from good medical is becoming much more a priority. I saw it happen with my own parents. So just something to think about. And then what's the resolution? How does this all come together to live out a quality of life and what that next chapter ends up looking like? So we have this worksheet. We can send it out to you so that you can fill it out. Do you remember being a kid and doing the ad libs? Well, this is kind of an adult ad lib. So filling this in for your own selves. So we'll be sure to follow up with this, but I'll just take you through the first paragraph here and you can think of it yourself. I'm going to pick a word, retire, go part-time, keep working from, and maybe that's Northrop Grumman there, when I'm, pick an age. After that, I'll probably set the alarm on your smartphone, an alarm clock, a smart speaker. What is it that's going to wake you up? Maybe the dog or the cat. To wake me up next to, pick someone, or maybe it is a pet, or maybe nobody else. At around what time? 8 o'clock. Oh, that sounds great. I'll most likely be living in, and pick a location. So this could be a really fun exercise to go through. And once again, we'll make sure that we follow up with you so that you can have some fun on this. And that, oops, let me go back to the screen here. I do apologize. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end today's presentation. And we thank you for joining us. Oops. I'll keep going through here. This is funny because maybe this was a husband and wife working on this together. So I'll end this presentation today, letting you know that we will do a follow-up and get that out to you. Here is our contact information at Blue Heron Financial Group, our website, our phone number. If you have any direct questions, please email Debbie at debbie.schilling@lpl.com. And thank you for attending today. And I hope it was thought-provoking, just a little step outside of maybe your comfort zone and even our financial planning comfort zone. But these are real questions that we hope you will challenge yourself and your loved ones with. We want to thank Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union, and we appreciate our affiliation through NGFCU Wealth Management. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll look forward to sharing more presentations in 2022.